Hey, hello, folks. Welcome to the Solid Waste Advisory Committee meeting for November 18th of 2025. I'm hopeful that everyone can see the slideshow and that their audio is working and that I'm coming through loud and clear. But if that's what you expected to see, the SWAC meeting, you're in the right place. I'm Sean Silver from MassDEP. For those of you who haven't been to SWAC, or for those who might need a brief reminder, the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, SWAC, is an opportunity for MassDEP to share information about solid waste and recycling programs throughout the state, and also to receive feedback from various stakeholders in and around that industry. So we hold these meetings 4 times a year, sometimes with some variation depending on needs. And, we look forward, obviously, to presenting information to you today and hearing back from you, which you can do via the chat. Feel free to raise your hand and you can give your feedback via audio as well. We'd be happy to take any questions or comments that you might have through the process of today's meeting. You might have heard at the beginning here, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the MassDEP YouTube page as well as the Solid Waste Advisory Committee webpage, along with today's presentation. So those are 2 elements that you'll be able to go back and take a look at after the meeting. We'll post them, soon after the meeting is finished. The purpose of today's meeting is kind of twofold. On one hand, John Fisher will be presenting the solid waste data for the state for the year 2024. I've kind of gone through that process and kind of have a picture of what's been going on in terms of disposal and the various elements of that. So that will be the first presentation for today, followed by something that we've been working on over the course of 2025, which is a midterm review of the most recent 2020 to 2030 solid waste master plan, of course 2025 being the middle of that sandwich, and taking the opportunity to review through our various work groups where we are with our solid waste master plan goals, where we expect to go, if there's any changes that need to be made through the various action plans that we have under the larger solid waste master plan. And, several folks that are on this call right now have been participating in that process. And, we look forward to kind of continue to talk through that today. So there's a lot to get to today. I won't belabor the process. I'll start by introducing John Fisher of MassDEP to go over, as mentioned, the 2024 solid waste data that we have.
Great. Thank you, Sean. And you can go into the first slide here.
There we go. Lots of numbers.
Lots of numbers this afternoon. So I am, as I go through and summarize and explain this data, I'm not going to dwell on every number in these charts because there's a lot, but I'm going to focus on what I see as the key takeaway points from this data set. And just maybe a quick word of introduction. In the Solid Waste Master Plan, we have a disposal reduction goal for 2030. And this data that's presented in this report is the data that we're gauging our progress against. So on an annual basis, we gather this data from our solid waste facilities. We also check with some of our other states where our waste goes, as well as some of the facilities in those states to compare in QA/QC data. But this is primarily data from Massachusetts Solid Waste Facility annual reports. So I'll jump right into it. This chart shows the past 2 years data compared, so 2023 and 2024. You can see, and you'll see this better in the next slide in a moment, but the trend's a little more clear in the next slide. But this is overall a relatively flat picture. We've not made progress on overall disposal reduction, so there's a slight uptick there, about 60,000 tons. All of these numbers, by the way, are rounded to the nearest 10,000 tons. And I'll kind of run through the rows here. But you can see going across, we have 2023 total. This is all in tons. 2024 total, and then the year-to-year tonnage change, whether it's an increase or if it's a decrease, it's shown in parentheses, and then the percent change. I wouldn't pay a whole lot of attention to the percent change. Some of those numbers can be quite large for some of the smaller components of the data, so that's not hugely meaningful. In this chart, I tend to focus more on the tonnage change. So you can see, again, top row is our total disposal, slight increase from 2023 to 2024. The in-state disposal has basically stayed level. So that's divided up into material that's disposed of at landfills in Massachusetts and materials that's disposed of at municipal waste combustion facilities in Massachusetts. And you can see there, basically a pretty flat trend year to year from 2023 to 2024. Where there's more movement is on the overall amount of waste that's exported. And I'll say a word here about what we mean by exports and imports. So exports are waste that's generated in Massachusetts and that is disposed of at disposal facilities in other states. That does not mean that MassDEP directed the disposal of that material at a particular facility or to a particular state, but that's where the material has flowed in our regional and even national solid waste disposal market. So I just want to, kind of clarify that aspect of the import and export data. We're not directly deciding where this waste is going. That's determined by the facilities that are managing and moving the waste material. You can see the overall, what we call a net export, increased by about 70,000 tons from 2023 to 2024. And so this is divided into gross exports, so the total exports, and then gross imports, or the total imports. So our total exports minus the total imports equals the net export, the amount that goes on a net basis from Massachusetts sources to disposal facilities in other states. And this obviously is a really, really substantial number, nearly 2.8 million tons. And if we're more successful at achieving our disposal reduction goals going forward, this is really where the change would take place. The in-state disposal is going to pretty much be what it is. It's the net export for disposal that's where the change is really going to happen in whatever direction that takes place. I'm going to go more into this MSW and non-MSW breakdown in a couple slides. This is really where the changes are happening in the data, is within those two categories. So just a word of definition and explaining acronyms here. MSW is what we call municipal solid waste. This is essentially our regular daily trash from households, businesses, and institutions in the state. Non-MSW is all the material that's not MSW. That's primarily construction and demolition materials, but then it can also include things like contaminated soils or sludges or other things like that if they are sent to a solid waste facility for disposal. Otherwise, they don't show up in our data. They only show up when they're going to a solid waste facility for disposal. And you can see a real big swing here. This is where there's really a tonnage swing in the data, with MSW actually dropping by about 140,000 tons compared with the prior year. So MSW going from about 1.6 to just under 1.5 million tons, but the non-MSW export going up by about 200,000 tons. So that's really the non-MSW increase combined with the MSW reduction is basically what gives you that net increase, with the non-MSW increase being a little bit greater. But I'm going to delve more into this in more slides as we go. So next slide, please, Sean. So this shows the same data. 2023 and 2024 on the right are the same as what you just saw. This just extends us back to our base year of 2018. It's getting to be a little unwieldy table here because we're comparing across a longer and longer time period. We'll still have to figure out that from a presentation standpoint soon, but for now, we're showing every year going back to 2018, which is our baseline year for measuring our disposal reduction progress in the 2030 Solid Waste Master Plan. So you can see there that if you look at that 2018 column on the far left, that we've had an increase of a little over 500,000 tons in total disposal from 2018 to 2024. So obviously that's going in the wrong direction overall. We want to see that number drop. So roughly a 10% increase in total disposal tonnage. A couple other things I'll highlight in this data is the trend with in-state landfilling. That's the second data row there where it says landfill, and the in-state combustion, which is 3 rows below that, the combustion total. Both of those rows shown in bold. You can see the drop off in both in in-state disposal, really substantial drop in landfill, in-state landfill disposal. Does not come as a surprise, did not come as a surprise. We know a number of landfills in Massachusetts have filled up and closed over the years. So we've seen a significant drop in the amount of tonnage handled. In-state at landfills, that's leveled off a little bit over the past 3 years. Similarly, in the early, right around that 2019 column there, we saw 2 of our in-state combustion facilities in Agawam and Pittsfield close. 2 smaller combustion facilities, but we went from 7 down to 5, and that's what accounted for that drop in disposal tonnage. But otherwise, the municipal waste combustion tonnage relatively flat, just changes year to year a little bit based on the amount of downtime or repairs those facilities are going through. But other than that, a relatively flat in-state disposal picture, especially over the past 3 years. Towards the end of this, I'll show our disposal capacity projections going forward. Net exports, you can see the substantial rise in net export. That's a combination of 2 things. One is the overall growth in solid waste disposal by about 500,000 tons. And then the second is that drop off in in-state disposal capacity by roughly about 1 million tons a year of lost in-state disposal capacity. So those 2 numbers are what's driving the increase in net exports that are going out of state for disposal. And I'll show again the MSW, non-MSW trends in a moment a little more clearly, because that's really the main dynamic within this data that I've seen. So let's do the next slide, please, Sean. Okay, so this is the total disposal data. So this top row here is the same row you just saw for 2018 through 2024. So that shows the percentage change on the right-hand side compared with 2018, and a percent change on the far right-hand side compared with 2023. And this shows it first for the total disposal, and then I've broken it out into the municipal solid waste and the non-municipal solid waste. Interestingly, the municipal solid waste is flat, and the non-municipal solid waste has grown by 50% during this period. So when we look at the overall disposal tonnage increase from 2018 to 2024, that's really where it's happened. It's with the non-municipal solid waste, and this is largely construction and demolition debris materials. Again, a smaller amount of things like contaminated soils, but that's really primarily what that non-MSW is. About 1.3 or 1.4 million tons out of that 1.7 million tons in 2024 was C&D materials. And you can see not just from 2018 to 2024, but also in the past year, that went up significantly. I'm going to both catch my breath and pause in a moment, but I just want to get through a couple more slides before I switch gears. So let's do the next one, Sean. Okay, so this is kind of a minor tangent from the data, but I think it's an interesting tangent in this data that we've been consistently showing for several years. So this shows basically what the overall change in disposal, the total disposal, looks like compared to the total change in the state economy. And this is the gross domestic product by state in millions of dollars, obviously a real huge number because it's the total economic activity in the state. And what's interesting here is that, normally all things being equal, that total disposal would more or less, approximately, relatively, track in line with the state's economy. Yet we've seen a 40% growth in the GDP by state during this period and 10% growth in total disposal. And then just looking at the past year, you can see the economy went up 6%, and total disposal went up 1%. This is also more interesting when we split out the MSW and the non-MSW again. So I'm going to do that as well. So next slide, please, Sean. Okay, so this is showing this in a graphical form. Just a little note about the scale and slope of these lines. It's a little bit of a function of different numbers on the two axes, so it doesn't necessarily show the slope exactly the same way. But you can see on the right is the axis that measures the GDP. That is the red line, if that's showing clearly for you, or if that's not showing clearly, the GDP is the line that starts in the lower left and goes up to the upper right. Whereas the municipal solid waste disposal, the blue line starts in the upper left and stays, again, relatively flat during this period, with the exception of some ups and downs year to year. But you can see the substantial growth in the state economy compared to the municipal solid waste disposal being essentially flat. The next slide shows the same comparison for the non-MSW, and it's very different. So next slide, please, Sean. Okay, so similar graph here. The line in the lower left going up to the upper right, that's the gross domestic product by state, or the red line. Again, that's the same thing I just showed you for the municipal solid waste. But what you can see is that the non-MSW is really tracking with that. Again, give or take, the non-MSW increased actually a little bit more on a percentage basis, 50% versus 40%. But you can see, again, a little bit of ups and downs, but over this period, the non-MSW really tracking in line with gross domestic product by state, whereas the non-MSW, we didn't see that trend. So it's just a really interesting split in this data, something we need to be thinking about. The MSW essentially a flat picture during this period with really significant increases in the non-MSW disposal. Let's see, I think one more here, Sean. Yeah. So this is just digging into the import-export data by state, just the past 2 years. And I'm going to pause after this one to kind of check in, see how people are doing, answer any questions that I can, and just go back over these slides before I move on to the next portion of this data. So the way this chart works is it's divided into quadrants. So we have the material that goes out of state for disposal on the top half. So on the left-hand side, this is our municipal solid waste. On the upper right, that's our non-MSW that's exported for disposal. Similarly, we have the same deal on the bottom of the chart, except that's waste that comes into Massachusetts for disposal from sources in other states. Much smaller than the amount that's going from us to other states, but there is still waste moving both into the state as well as out of the state. So you can see, I'm not going to go through every number here, but I'm going to highlight a couple things. First, real substantial export tonnage, both for MSW and non-MSW. An interesting trend is that is where it's going, or really how far it's going. And I apologize if you don't know your state abbreviations here, but running down here, you can see Alabama, Connecticut, Indiana, Maine, Michigan, New Hampshire, New York, Ohio, South Carolina, and Virginia. So with the real exception of Connecticut, New Hampshire, and New York, which is pretty facilities that are relatively close to us and where that waste is probably moving by trailer truck, all these other states are typically receiving this waste by rail car. And if you look back at this data from 5-6 years ago, the distribution of waste was a little bit different in terms of where it's traveling. And we're seeing more and more significant amounts of waste go to other states by export. You can see this on the MSW side in the upper left and the non-MSW side in the upper right. The non-MSW is particularly concentrated going to Ohio, but you can see in both cases waste traveling pretty far and relatively significant amounts by rail to other states for disposal. And both the the distribution and the number of states receiving Massachusetts waste for disposal by rail has grown over time. So let me pause there. I know I just ran through a lot of numbers, and I'm happy to, take any questions or comments that folks have so far, and happy, we can certainly jump back to some of these slides if that would help clarify the data.
Yeah, John, some very interesting stuff so far. If anybody would like to ask a question or make a comment, please just raise your hand as always, and we'd be happy to take them. Or put it in the chat as well. I see a raised hand from Janet. Janet, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I just wanted to check the GDP that you said went up by 40% over, I think it was 5 years?
Oh, I got, yeah.
2019 to 2024?
Yeah, can you just move back to that slide, Sean?
Sure.
Go back one. Yeah,
there
this one. So these are the actual numbers. So that was going back to 2018.
Okay, and I'm sorry, this one's national and the other one's Massachusetts, or is this also Massachusetts?
This is Massachusetts. So this is our gross domestic product data for Massachusetts only. I wasn't showing any national data. This is all Massachusetts specific economic data.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, folks?
One in the
Yeah, I'm seeing one in the chat here.
How is waste tonnage trended with population trend 2018 to 2024? I didn't do that comparison directly. We could certainly do that, but I know that population hasn't changed anywhere near the increase that we've seen in the state economic indicator. And in fact, I'm not even positive that population has grown, but we can certainly look up those numbers. That wouldn't be a bad data point to include in the report, just to clarify the correlation with population change versus the gross domestic product. But generally speaking, I didn't really clarify this, but there's a reason that waste tends to track in line with gross domestic product. When the economy is doing well, people are buying more, people are purchasing more, they're bringing more into their homes, and are also typically disposing of more out of their homes. Same, potentially holds true for business. More economic activity equals more material moving, more packaging.
Yeah, building, renovating.
Yeah,
all those things.
Certainly shows up in the building trends as well.
Yeah. And Tom Mackey had a question. Where's MSW ash in numbers? We're going to get to that slide.
Yeah, the MSW ash is nowhere in these numbers.
Oh, gotcha. I thought we had an ash slide.
Nowhere in the numbers that that I've covered so far, but yes, we do have a slide on the ash. I'll get to that in a moment.
Okay, any others at this juncture? If not, we'll push forward. Okay. So I think we were finished with this one, or were we into this one?
Yeah, we can go to the next one.
Oh, look at that.
Hey, thanks for the segue, Tom. So this shows another aspect of our data, which, as I mentioned, this does not show up as disposal. So this material is material that was quote disposed of at a municipal waste combustion facility. The ash that comes out as a residual from those facilities, of course, also often requires disposal. I should say not always, because some of that ash is used in other ways, but a large part of that ash goes for disposal in landfills. And you can see this chart shows the amount of ash disposed on a tonnage basis for each of our 5 municipal waste combustion facilities, total at the bottom. Of note, these facilities also recover metal for recycling in 2 different ways. That can be either pre-combustion, the facility that does that primary mode of recovering metal is the CMAS combustion facility. For the most part, other combustion facilities recover metal after the combustion process primarily. But you can see CMAS is some of both. So this is obviously part of the solid waste management system and an important part, but it's not data that's all this data is counted within the ash data is counted within the MSW disposal at municipal waste combustion facilities. The metal recovery is netted out of that and not considered disposal. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. And this is the projected closure year of each of the materials that are ash landfills. They're taking ash for disposal. They're not necessarily the only landfills that can accept ash for disposal. In fact, the Bourne landfill accepts a significant amount of ash for disposal from CMAS, which actually does directly affect the available capacity for municipal solid waste at the Bourne landfill. Let's go to next slide, please. Okay. This slide I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but this gives an idea of the capacity to transfer waste by rail for disposal. So this relates
now. Just get some figures.
I don't know.
So this relates closely to the import-export data by state that I was talking about a few minutes ago. So it's this rail-based transfer capacity that provides the infrastructure and the operational ability for this waste to move to other states by rail for disposal. So this data doesn't directly connect to the prior data that I presented, but it just gives you an idea about the potential capacity for facilities within Massachusetts to transfer waste by rail. Doesn't mean they're necessarily moving these specific amounts for disposal by rail, but it shows their ability to do that, the capacity to do that. Next one.
John, I might pause right here for a second because we do have a couple of ash questions
Oh, sure.
in the chat. One is just about the high amount of ash disposal at Saugus, and the other one about metals recovery occurring at Shrewsbury and whether or not that's accounted for.
Sorry, can you just bounce back to that slide
Yes.
for a moment? Okay. Okay, Saugus We can certainly take a look at that. Confirm that that's reported accurately. I'll flag that and just look at it. I don't know off the top of my head the reason why that is. I do know that in some cases, facilities may beneficially reuse some portion of that. That might be a factor in the relative amount. And what was the second part, Sean?
Second part was about the metal recovery at Shrewsbury, which
Okay.
I guess we're seeing here.
So this is the data from the combustion facility reports.
Mhm.
So if they're it's whatever each combustion facility reported as ash disposal or metal recovery. Okay, we can flag these ones in particular and double check that we get those numbers correct, but that's what this is based on.
Yeah, so Don is saying here, additional 20,000 tons per year of metals recovered at Shrewsbury reported separately on monofill reports. So I guess that's a different way of looking at the data, right?
Okay, yeah. Thanks. We'll look into that other facility report and see if we can be making an adjustment to this table.
Thanks for the feedback on that. Okay. But yeah, just I figured now would be a good point to deal with any ash related
Okay.
questions. We did rail. I
Ye-
think we were here next, right, John?
Yeah. So you
Okay.
think you've seen some dense tables so far. So this is the only way I can make this table better to view, well, is to either zoom in or to break it into 2 pages. Because this is kind of the data we have to show. But I will kind of frame it and explain it here. So what this does, and this table actually feeds into the next one. So we'll kind of try to run through this step by step here to make it all fit together. Active landfills, and this is in-state disposal facility capacity. So we have the landfill capacity at the top. And what you can see here is, so first of all, 5 landfills. There are a couple smaller landfills that just accept waste within a municipality, but they're not listed as part of this, and we historically haven't listed them. The amounts are very small and generally not commercially available. Don't really have a meaningful impact on capacity. So this just shows the amount of landfills that are basically operating as commercial landfills. There's a row for each, projects their capacity going out through 2030, until 2030. And you can see overall not huge changes in the projected capacity through 2030. And we kind of show 2 levels of capacity, the actual within the current operating permit, and then the projected total lifetime of the landfill. That may change depending on how the landfill is utilized. And you can see here that the total capacity, actual disposal capacity, which is shown in that in the adjusted total landfill capacity row for 2024 is less than the total permitted landfill capacity, and that just reflects what we saw in the 2024 data. So that shows, if you look down at the notes at the bottom, we have these modifiers because total permanent capacity doesn't always really align with what's happening operationally at a facility. So we basically adjust that downwards based on how the capacity is actually being used at this point in time, which could change. But so we modify the permanent landfill capacity by a modifier of 61%, permanent combustion capacity by a modifier of 85%, which gives us kind of a more realistic capacity number. So if you kind of follow the rows down, you can see kind of in the middle, we have these 2 bolded rows. The second one says adjusted total landfill capacity. That is the number that feeds into our next table that I'm going to show you. So this is a number that we're kind of using as kind of our working estimate of our in-state landfill capacity going forward on an annual basis. And then municipal waste combustors, kind of same deal, where you see the adjusted total combustion capacity going across there. And then the total potential in-state disposal capacity just below that is the sum of the total in-state landfill capacity adjusted downwards, and the sum of the total in-state combustion capacity adjusted downwards. So it gives us this pretty flat picture of about 3.5 million tons per year of projected in-state capacity through 2030. As you can see from some of the dates up in the upper left, that depending on how that capacity is utilized, we could have, drop-offs in landfill capacity right after 2030. Similarly, if any of these combustion facilities were to close, that would obviously, that capacity would obviously come off of this table as well. But there's no projected closure year for those facilities at this point. So at this point, they're just projected going forward as they are. So just kind of keep in mind that total potential in-state disposal capacity number, the bottom row here. And I'm going to jump into the next table where this feeds into, and these tables kind of go together. So I'm going to try to present both of these before we stop for questions. So just go to the next one, Sean. Okay. So this is the way we've been projecting waste management capacity projections. So this goes just out through 2030. The 2024 data is the actual data based on what was reported to us. And you can see the way this works is in the top two rows, we project two possible scenarios for total disposal. And you could certainly project others. When I say project, this doesn't mean that this is what we're saying we think is necessarily going to happen, but it's just projecting forward two assumptions forward into time. So one is that total disposal remains flat all the way out through 2030. The second, which honestly seems less and less realistic at this point in time, is that we make sufficient progress year by year on a linear basis. It's a 6% reduction per year to achieve our 2030 disposal reduction goal, which comes out to about 4 million tons by 2030. So that would take year by year sequential reductions of 6%, which is obviously completely different than what's happened over the, from 2018 to 2024. So again, not to say that this is what we're projecting will happen, but it's in my mind, it's kind of a tool for showing the significance of trying to achieve that goal, because you see the gap of about 2.2 million tons. If you look at those top two rows, about 6.2 million tons staying flat, 4 million tons if we were to achieve progress by 2030 to actually meet our goal. Obviously, anywhere in between would be in between. And if there happened to be a disposal increase between now and 2030, it would obviously be that much higher. So we take those two possible disposal scenarios, one in the white, one shaded. We subtract out the in-state combustion capacity, that's the middle three rows, and that gives us two possible scenarios for net export that go right off of the top two rows at the top. And again, you can see pretty flat. If disposal stays flat, projected net export is going to stay pretty flat because our total in-state management capacity is projected to remain flat through 2030. Obviously, if we were to achieve our disposal reduction goal by 2030, that's that 6% reduction in disposal per year, we would have a really substantial reduction in net disposal for export, but nearly 2 million tons a year reduction. So that's what this chart shows. Again, the caveat, sometimes, we get asked why these projections versus other projections. And I think, the projection to meet the disposal reduction goal is an obvious choice to me, whether we think it's going to happen or not. It's just I think an appropriate scenario to project to show what that would look like. And a flat disposal tonnage picture is just another way of showing potential gaps in disposal capacity and then the resulting net disposal for export, depending on both that disposal capacity as well as what actually happens with total disposal. So I'm going to pause there and again, take questions here.
Same thing as before, folks, feel free to raise your hand. I see Janet has raised her hand. Please go ahead.
I just have a question / comment. It's really more of a comment. Let's be real. We don't have time to do it today. I totally appreciate every single number you're presenting. And I get what you just said about having to project, these suppositions as you've presented them. But what I would like to consider is at another SWAC meeting, looking at getting more into the nitty gritty of what is disposed of now and really how we could reduce those, what do you call them, like constituencies or whatever. I mean, I think it sounds like when it's presented this way, and again, I totally understand why you're doing it this way. It's like, oh, it's so pie in the sky to even hope for 6% less or whatever. But if we really look at, the current regs, the bans, et cetera, and what's happening with them, I think it'll all give us a much better sense of what is possible, what we need to do to get these numbers even better in terms of reduction. So again, it's for another meeting, but I just want an official request to dive into all that at a future meeting. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Janet. That actually is a lot of what we think about when we're thinking about how we run our programs, how we prioritize materials that we focus on, things like that. And it's really about our waste characterization data. So I think I agree that's a really important way to look at the disposal data. We certainly do that internally at MassDEP, but happy to have a more in-depth conversation about that. We will have 2025 is a waste characterization study year for our municipal waste combustion facilities. So we're going to get updated waste characterization data that will be submitted to us in February of 2026. So maybe that's a good time to do that. Let's look at the updated data, see what we're seeing. There are some trends that we're hoping to see in that data. In terms of, I mean, it always adds up to 100%. So no matter what you do, you get 100%. But areas where we have particular programmatic focus and emphasis, we're hoping that, that data will show that, those materials being reduced as a portion of the solid waste stream. So that's going to be a really interesting data to look at. It always is. And that's probably a good time to have that discussion after we get that 2025 data in.
Thank you, Janet. I do see a comment in the chat about why we don't have under rail facilities, we don't have anything for wear.
We'll look at that. I ran these. We don't have like an official list of rail capacity, so we kind of have to go through these one by one with our regional offices. I will check with our Western region about that. Oh, actually, is that Tri-County Recycling or is that something different? Who asked that question?
That was John in the chat. Yeah, so I mean, we do have a facility there listed. I'm not sure if that's the facility that we're talking about.
Yeah, don't recall a specific name off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'll double check with our Western region about that.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, we do, talk to our section chiefs in the different parts of the state to get that information, and they would know as well as anybody. So
yeah, we'll follow up on that.
Will recycling and or composting be discussed? Yes, it will, Alini. Yes. Okay, John, are you ready to go forward?
Yeah, and I actually don't remember what I had another subject.
Let's see. We had done this slide, and I think hey, look at that.
Yeah. Okay.
Are you done with this one, John?
I am. Yeah. So why don't you just go here for a second? So I'll talk about next steps here. So this link shows you all of our solid waste data updates that are posted thus far. And that is where we will be posting this this data following the meeting here. We, as usual, we typically get a couple comments and questions that we like to check on from kind of QA/QC perspective. We had a couple of those come up today, so we'll double check on that, give a final look at the data, and then we publish this. The data that we presented, there's a PowerPoint here. We publish a final version of that as a PDF document up on our website. So that will come in the week of this meeting. So that's the next step. That's all I've got on this topic.
All right. Thank you, John, and thank you folks who have had feedback and questions about that. I know personally it's an arduous process to put that data together to be able to give a holistic picture of what's going on in the state in terms of disposal. And like John said, there's opportunity to get more into the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty in future meetings per Janice's request. That is information that we can see and can analyze. So thank you, John. We're going to give John a little break here and move into the next part of our SWAC meeting for today. And this is where the recycling and composting gets talked about to one of the chat comments that we recently received. So we are at the midpoint of the 2030 solid waste master plan. The solid waste master plans are in 10-year increments. They establish the overarching solid waste policy framework for our organization. The most recent one was finalized in 2021. As I mentioned, we're looking at 2030 for the endpoint. It takes a big picture framework for solid waste and recycling in the state, and we have multiple individual action plans that are associated with different work groups for different materials, such as, for instance, we're going to be hearing today from Claudine Elliott with respect to the recycling market development work group, which some of you have been involved in. We're going to be hearing from Mike Elliott about the construction and demolition subcommittee. We'll hear from John Fisher again about the organics subcommittee. We will hear from Janice Paré regarding the reduce and reuse work group, the R&R work group as it's known popularly, and from Caitlin King with the household hazardous products program, which has been very busy over the last year or so. There's action plans for different materials, different sectors here, and those are updated as needed. So given the fact that we have the ability to update these action plans, we figured we'd take a mid-course program review, work through the different work groups, work through this committee here, the SWAC group, and we can use the opportunity to report on our progress implementing our programs and policies, update those action plans, the ones that I just referred to, and propose any adjustments that are needed. Obviously, considering our staffing, funding availability for going forward and implementing those adjustments. Right. Our goal is to complete this process by the end of the year. And today we want to share, some of the progress that we've made, the discussions that we've had, and also, solicit further comments, questions, feedback on how these different work groups and subcommittees have been functioning and the sort of progress that we're making, toward our 2030 goals. So that's, the next part of this meeting here. I think we have 2.5 hours blocked off. We've, used most of the first hour to go through that very dense data there. And this part will be kind of hitting a little more quickly on these specific work groups. So I'll start with Claudine Elliott. She's the branch chief for our commercial waste reduction branch, and she's going to present on the recycling market development work group. So Claudine, I'll bring up your first slide. And you have listed here some of our priorities for commercial waste reduction.
Yes, thank you. So there are a number of commercial waste reduction priorities, including the initiatives described as part of our recycling market development working groups and action plan, as well as launching our waste reduction innovation grant, expanding the MassDEP waste bans, increasing the amount and frequency of MassDEP waste ban inspections, technical assistance from Recycling Works Massachusetts, and networking, education, outreach, and information sharing. So over the past couple of years or so, we've held 10 working groups thus far as part of recycling market development efforts. And the first meeting covered MassDEP's current market development programs, including the Recycling Business Development Grant, Recycling Loan Fund, waste bans, and municipal grants and buy recycled requirements. Our second meeting focused on regional and national perspectives, with meetings 3 through 6 focusing on topics including business support, demand side strategies, education and outreach, and research and development. These meetings also included 4 different breakout groups for packaging, organics, construction and bulky materials, and lastly, materials with new and evolving or emerging markets. Meetings 7 through 10 were around the action plan itself and structured around barriers, primarily technical, logistical, and economic, and solutions to those barriers, and included external presenters such as EPA, SBIR, MassTech, M2I2, MassHire, 2M, Business Front Door, Division of Apprentice Standards, and BDC Capital. So moving forward, we will conduct a deeper dive into the breakout material categories, starting out this spring with both virtual and supplemental in-person meetings on emerging markets. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to do a bit of a walkthrough of the action items within our recycling market development action plan. So in terms of business support and economic development strategies, or supporting the growth of existing reuse and recycling businesses and developing new reuse and recycling businesses, we are continuing to implement the Recycling and Reuse Business Development Grant, or RBDG, as well as the Recycling Loan Fund. In terms of RBDG, we anticipate to launch the next round of applications by next month, December, and we continue to be ahead of schedule in terms of implementing the innovation grant, which was anticipated as a medium-term or 3 to 4 year timeframe. However, we launched this in April of this year, and we are planning to announce award finalists pending agreement on grant scope and contract also by next month. In terms of items 3 through 5 here, with 3 connecting businesses to webinars, workshops, particularly on business planning, grant writing, and financial analysis, as well as item 4, updating the recycling business guidance document, which includes permit requirements, and 5, financial and technical assistance offered through state and regional economic development organizations. We have initiated these in year 1 and have continued to move forward with these in year 2. Next slide, please. So just continuing on with the support and economic development strategies, we are currently implementing items 6 through 10, emphasizing program outreach and marketing to minority-owned businesses and businesses near environmental justice populations, connecting recycling businesses to MassHire career centers, coordinating with Recycle Smart messaging, and connecting with the Reduce and Reuse Action Plan. And we are very much engaged with our municipal branch counterpart and our green team channels in an effort to make Recycle Smart a household name. And lastly here, item 10 for this section, we are continuing to monitor recycling market development programs in other states, such as Washington, Colorado, Michigan, and other Northeast Recycling Council or NERC states. And we continue to be engaged in conferences, webinars, and participation in regional forums. Next slide, please. So now moving on to building demand for recycled products. In terms of item 1, we are currently engaging other state sister agencies on purchasing recycled products and are in consistent communication with the Operational Services Division, or OSD, on this effort. Items 2 through 5, we see as a bit of a future program commitment. So using the Recycle Smart Massachusetts program as an outreach channel for increasing purchasing of recycled content products, holding workshops to provide guidance to businesses on opportunities to purchase recycled products, and providing funding for pilot projects using recycled materials with a focus on state agencies, municipalities, and again, working with OSD and the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance, or DCAM. So stepping back, just in terms of item 4 here, we have been engaged with a large number of recycling processors and manufacturers about barriers, including a deeper dive into the neighboring New York State market outlets. So next slide, please. Continuing on with building demand for recycled products, we see much of the engagement with the state legislature, including joint committees, also as future program commitment in the long term. So that's 5-year or so time frame, so nearing 2030. And we are currently implementing items 2 through 4 here, connecting with MassDEP's deconstruction work group, including supporting a building reuse infrastructure. And we are also continuing to explore regional partnerships as part of this effort. Next slide, please. So just moving on to research and development, in terms of item 1 on this table, discussing potential partnerships for collaborative project funding with the Massachusetts Technology Collaborative. We see this as a future program commitment. However, we have initiated discussions with MassTech and M2I2, and they presented at our working group in September of last year. And we've also initiated in year 1 and continued in year 2, item 2 here, utilizing Massachusetts college and university system to kickstart research and development on material recycling processes, applications, and design for reuse or recyclability. And this is, of course, related to the innovation grant we launched this past spring, and how to increase efficiency and economic viability. So we see item 3 here, working with OSD again on other state agencies to pilot and test performance of recycled content products. It's more of a future program commitment around the 4-year time frame with a focus on products new to the market. Next slide, please. So just on to the last bit of my presentation here, item 4 for research and development. Again, through the Innovations Grant Program launched just this year, we plan to start testing new recycled content products, applications, and technologies. And on a related note, we also hope to support incubator and accelerator programs soon in support of the Innovation Grants Program. And this would include leveraging other funding and investment opportunities, such as foundation funding. And lastly, for research and development, we are currently assessing, of course, as stated during the SWAC meeting, other MassDEP action plan connections on a regular basis. So that's all I have for recycling market development updates. Back to you, Sean.
Thank you, Claudine. Appreciate that. And I think it's important to note, this group kind of got off the ground in 2022. And I do think, particularly with the innovation grant, that a lot has happened in that time. The action plan was published a year and a half ago at this point. So we're going to keep working, obviously, on recycling market development. There's a lot of a lot of parts to those tables that you just presented. So it's kind of I think we've done a couple of big things to kick it off. A lot of these things are more medium term, and longer term things are they're going to progress over time. But certainly I think there's been a lot of healthy engagement with this group, and we're pleased with what we've done so far. So thanks, Claudine. I do have a question from Claire about the legislative engagement part. And John there just linked to the action plan from February 2024 in the chat. John, do you want to, handle that at all?
Sure. So, yeah, as far as recycling market development proposals or legislative recycling market development proposals, we do not have specific proposals that we're trying to advance at this time. We had, intended that to be something we'd focus on a little bit further down the road as we progress some of these other programs. I'll also note that towards the end of today, I'll be talking about the Extended Producer Responsibility Commission, and that's likely going to be our short-term focus on legislative-related issues.
Yeah, that's a good point, John. Thank you. Any other questions or comments at this juncture before we move to our next speaker, our next presentation? Okay. Thank you, Claudine. We'll move along to Mike Elliott, who's going to be talking about the C&D subcommittee and what's been going on over there. Sorry, I just gotta. Oh, look at that MassDEP logo out of place. Gotta love formatting slideshows. That's not Mike's fault. That's probably mine. But I think you can read that, the MassDEP C&D Action Plan Mid-Course Assessment. Mike, would you like to take it away?
Thanks, Sean, and thanks everyone for being on the call today. All right. Are you going to be advancing the slide, Sean?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, great. All right. I just wanted to mention that I'll start out by saying that the C&D Action Plan that is currently linked to the Solid Waste Master Plan is one of several action plans that is we've been evaluating over the past year to see if there's specific actions that we can improve upon. And I'll just remind folks that back in 2019, when we put together the C&D Action Plan, we established 4 main objectives. And the link at the bottom right-hand corner of this page would bring you to the current C&D Action Plan as it currently is structured. Like I said, the 4 main objectives are, and they remain the same, even going through this assessment process. The first one is to improve job site waste management. Second one, to enhance collection and processing, largely through our C&D processors that we have across the state. Third one is to working closely with Claudine and Sean's recycling market development team, develop end markets. And fourth is to promote interagency cooperation to advance leading by example, which is something that I think we're all working towards. So why don't we go to the next slide? So I'm not taking the time to go through all the action items that are already currently listed. You can look at the existing C&D action plan to see what we listed back at the beginning in 2020. What I'm listing in the next couple slides is just some of the suggestions we heard. We met the C&D subcommittee C&D subcommittee met twice in the past year, in May and then again in September, to discuss suggestions for improving or making modifications to our C&D action plan. So if we could go to the next slide, Sean. I'm not seeing the next slide. Is anybody else? I'm still seeing current C&D action plan.
I've hit a bit of a snag here.
Oh, okay.
Just give me a whoa, wow. Did everyone just see that? Because all the slides happened at once. Okay, there we go.
Beautiful. All right.
Sorry.
All right. So under the first objective, to improve job site waste management, we have already been working closely with the Reduce and Reuse Deconstruction Work Group, and we will continue to do so. We're going to hear from Janice later on today, but their team has really, I think, done a fabulous job launching the deconstruction work group and working with a lot of external partners to develop work practices for job site source separation, for adaptive reuse of existing buildings, for deconstruction. So, all of these things are applicable to reducing the amount of C&D waste that we generate by not generating the waste in the first place. That's the highest level on the waste management hierarchy. So we will continue to work closely with the reduce and reuse deconstruction work group. I'm not sure they existed, so we're going to put that in our action plan because I don't think they existed when we put this action plan together, or if they did, it was very, very early in their existence. And then we consistently hear from the processors and from the recyclers that we need to do something about eliminating contamination by treated wood. Some people have historically referred to it as pressure treated wood. One of the suggestions we heard was to adopt certain best practices that are in the California Treated Wood Alternative Management Standards, the AMS. Things like segregation, storage, disposal, so to prevent this material from ending up in the waste stream in the first place, or at least ending up at the processors that are trying to separate the recyclable materials. Obviously, it has to be disposed of somewhere, since treated wood at the moment doesn't really have any, at least not locally, it doesn't have any really viable markets other than combustion. And then we've heard a lot about doing more outreach and education, especially with general contractors, developers, trade associations, unions, vocational schools. Really reach out to the folks who are on the front line doing the work and catch them early in their career development process. It's kind of related to what I often hear in the reduce and reuse meetings about workforce development, right? We're working on workforce development. Okay, Sean, if we could go to the next slide, please. So under Objective 2, enhance collection and processing. Something that's already underway is to, in terms of improving the performance of our existing C&D processors. And I should just mention that we have about 30 large C&D handling facilities across the state, of which 18 are permitted as processors, which means they take in mixed C&D waste, they recover the recyclable materials for recycling, and then the residuals are sent for disposal. And we have established, in 2020, we established a minimum performance standard, which was 2 measurable performance criteria that all these handling facilities would have to meet. And just this past year, we increased the, one of the performance criteria is the so-called process separation rate. We increased the process separation minimum threshold this past year from the initial 15% up to 20%. And by 2030, we will incrementally increase it up to 25% process separation rate. And we're working closely with the facilities to make sure that they're making progress towards achieving that objective. We've also heard, mostly from the sustainability managers within construction firms or the green building consultants, that we need to improve the accuracy and precision of our operating reports. So we have actually done that. In the past year, we met with a number of stakeholders, and we developed an annual report form. We converted it from the old Word fillable form format to an Excel format that allows us to do a lot of calculations on the fly, where immediately as soon as the person submits their data, first of all, the data is being validated, the mass balances are being calculated, and we can actually do some of the so-called minimum performance data, NPS compliance status analysis immediately as soon as the data is entered. And we've also just this past year increased the frequency of the reporting, the frequency of reporting for the 18 large C&D processors from annually to quarterly, because they're the ones that are subject to these increasingly more stringent process separation rate minimum threshold. So we want to make sure that we're tracking very closely how they're doing quarter to quarter to make sure that they're not slipping. And then, of course, as I think a very common theme. We heard this, from John's initial introduction. We are always looking to increase compliance and enforcement with the resources we have. We will certainly increase the frequency of site inspections, ensure that we are strictly enforcing the permit requirements. And I'm working with a small team of inspectors. There's like 5 of us working on developing an objective compliance standard that we can use for evaluating the C&D residuals to make sure they meet our definition of separating all wasteland materials to the greatest extent possible. Next slide, please, Sean.
Again, sorry, Mike, I'm
No problem. Yeah.
pushing the button and my computer's not, okay. Is this the one? Yes.
Actually, the objective 3, I think is, here we
Sorry
are.
about that.
All right.
Okay.
So developing end markets, again, as I mentioned a moment ago, we want to, we're already working with the relatively, nascent reuse, recycling market development, reuse and recycling market development team work group. And we want to continue to develop that collaboration. In fact, we'll be hosting jointly a meeting in December 11th, talking about C&D recycling materials for C&D materials for recycling, and we're doing that both jointly with the RMD work group. So we're looking forward to continuing to work more closely with them. We're always looking to expand markets for C&D wood. That's the largest, by far, by weight, by volume. That's the largest material in the C&D waste stream. And we have seen the wood markets contracting, since the early 2000s when the C&D waste bans were first promulgated. So we're constantly looking for expanding the existing markets and finding new markets for wood. We're certainly going to continue looking into international markets for using the wood chip as biomass fuel, both in Canada and the EU and further. And we are very anxiously looking to find and explore markets for the B wood. That's the painted and treated wood, which really contaminates a lot of the material that the processors are trying to separate. It makes it much harder for them. So if we could find a market for that B wood, it might, would really, I think, help make a lot of our problems go away and help us to recover more of the A wood. The A wood is the clean wood that can be recycled with the highest use. And then we're, of course, always looking to develop other markets or help develop markets for the products that are derived from these materials. And it's been suggested that we should explore market development opportunities with the large civil works projects that are planned for, like the down on Cape Cod, the bridge replacement projects over the next 5 to 10 years. There might be a lot of opportunity there to reuse some of the materials that we're separating. Next slide, please, Sean. And objective 4 is to promote the interagency cooperation, leading by example. Again, you've heard this reference before. DCAM is an important partner in this. That's the Department of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance. They're the people that maintain all of all the state's properties, both owned and leased. And we want to make sure that the design specs that they've got include clauses to reuse recycled C&D waste. Of course, that really probably involves working with OSD on their environmentally preferential products list for the procurement. We'd like to support DCAM with development of deconstruction specs. It was really exciting at the deconstruction task force a couple of weeks ago. I was sitting next to some high-level managers from DCAM, and they thought that was very doable, that they could develop a spec for deconstruction. So we'd like to work with them and help support that. And we'd like to participate with DCAM in pilot deconstruction projects to demonstrate that long term, on balance, deconstruction is as cost effective, if not more cost effective than traditional demolition. And then, of course, we'll continue to pursue opportunities with MassDOT. And I should have mentioned here also, I'm hearing more and more. I've been back and forth with DOT this past week, and they're telling me, hey, you need to reach out to the Department of Conservation and Recreation. I know John Fisher has mentioned that several times to me. Reach out to DCR. DCR maintains a lot of roads. We might be able to use asphalt shingles, aggregates like ABC, processed glass aggregate. All of these things have potential reuse opportunities in our built infrastructure here in the state. And we want to try to help amplify the work of the newly formed Embodied Carbon Intergovernmental Coordinating Council Initiative. That's a mouthful. The ECICC. Embodied carbon is really what C&D is all about, right? We're generating this waste that required energy to produce these materials in the first place. The materials themselves contain a certain amount of embodied carbon that went into the development, the wood, the growth of the wood, the extraction of the CO2 from the atmosphere. And the more that we can avoid generating the waste, extend the use of the wood, and reuse the wood, will certainly help reduce the amount of embodied carbon footprint that we're generating across the state. All right, next slide, please, Sean. I think that was the last one. It might just be my contacts. Yeah, so here's my contacts and links to our C&D action plan, our C&D webpage, and also the C&D subcommittee webpage, where you can find the C&D subcommittee webpage has the link to register for the upcoming meeting on December 11th on market development for certain materials, asphalt shingles, gypsum wallboard, plastics, and brick, masonry brick. So we'll discuss those 4 items. And if anybody has any questions, happy to take them.
Go ahead, Janet.
So thanks for all that. Super interesting. Am I correct, going back an hour or so to John's slides, that the area where we're seeing more waste, where we want to see less, is largely C&D? Did I get that right?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
And Michael, do you have is that just because there's building more, or is that a particular type of material? Like, what's your quickie analysis of that?
I might ask John for help on this, but I think it's an interesting question, Janet, because we've seen. I think for one thing, a lot of the infrastructure is aging. We go out to some on these site visits now, and we see some of these facilities. The equipment they installed was installed in the early 2000s, so it's 20 years old. Some of it was acquired from, at the time, a lot of this equipment came from Europe, and they have trouble getting replacement parts. But I'm not going to make excuses. I think part of it too is that there's been a lot of turnover in recent years, a lot of the consolidation within the industry. You go from one year to the next, it's a completely different set of actors. From the operations managers down to the folks working on the line. And I don't know how well these facilities that used to achieve much higher separation rates, but they don't seem to be able to produce it anymore. I think it has to do with the volume, the sheer volume of C&D waste generated has gone up, and the higher the volume, it seems the less efficient they can recover the recyclable materials. So I think it's a question of just increased volume of material being generated. We need to. That's why we're putting so much emphasis on reducing the amount of waste generated at the source, job site source separation and deconstruction.
Thank you, Mike. Any other follow-up on that, or questions or comments? I think I saw something in the chat. This is from the first slide. Claire had said here, You had talked about job site waste management. Is DEP engaging with builders associations, NAHB, BAGB, etc.? And I can go back to that slide if necessary. That was one of the 4 main
Right.
objectives, job site waste management.
Not that I'm aware of. Most of our involvement has been through the what's it called? The Association of General Contractors of Massachusetts, so AGCMA. And I know we're hearing that we need to do more outreach with contractors, and probably was the suggestion in the comment building associations, was that right? Was that I heard?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
the NAHB and the BAGB. I'll have to Google those.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Um,
I have not had any contact with them, but we'll certainly I think that's a good suggestion that we should, I mean, the bottom line was we need to do more outreach to promote better work practices at the job site and produce less waste, do more job sites separation and generate less waste.
Claire, please go ahead. I see your hand raised.
Yep, Builders Association of Greater Boston and National Association of Home Builders. I only know that because my ex-husband was involved with those organizations. And there's another one too, and I can't remember the name of it.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I see John's comment right now. Will a recording of the session be available? Yes, we will post a recording. We'll post the presentations, and the presentations have all the relevant information you need to find these action plans and dig into them. Yeah, so again, Mike, a lot of stuff going on. Thanks to folks for their engaging questions as well. And yeah, Mike, we look forward to that kind of joint meeting with the C&D group and the Recycling Market Development group in December. And I will continue to publicize that through our email channels. So you can find it on our webpage, and we'll definitely let you know how folks here in attendance can be there on December 11th. So thank you. Appreciate your time. Next up, we're going to go back to John Fisher. And John is going to give updates on the organics action plan. So John, I hope you've had a little time and maybe had a cup of tea and you're ready for another presentation.
Ready to go again.
Great.
All right. So one of the things that we identified specifically to look at in our solid waste master plan review is kind of whether and how, if so, how to proceed with a reduced threshold for our food waste disposal ban. And we did have a meeting a little while back with our organic subcommittee, and we have another one coming up soon. So that's what I'm going to be presenting, kind of a more concise version of what I presented at that meeting. So next slide, please, Sean. So this is just, I think, really important context to keep in mind. I think we should have maybe always start every presentation with food waste with this kind of data. So we have a lot of wasted food in our society. It happens at every stage. Nationally, about a third of our food that gets grown or produced goes uneaten at some point in the process. And national data shows we spend, nearly $800 per person for food that we don't eat. So that is contrasted with the fact that 1 in 6 Massachusetts residents are food insecure. So we're throwing about 900,000 tons of food material in the trash each year, and we have lots of people who need that food. So I think that's kind of an important place to start. We can go to the next slide, Sean. Okay, so looking at food waste, we talked about waste characterization data a little bit earlier. We know that food waste represents the greatest portion of our trash from any material. Despite progress that we made, it's about 930,000 tons a year. We estimate slightly more commercial than residential. Our goal, working off of a 2018 baseline where we were diverting about 280,000 tons per year of food material from disposal, we want to increase that by 500,000 tons per year by 2030 to get us to 780,000 tons total. And currently, well, not currently, but through 2024, we're at 370,000 tons. That's our most recent data. So we need about 400,000 more tons to get to that goal. And our current capacity, which I'll circle back to, is a little over 500,000 tons per year, give or take. Next slide, please. Okay, so, as we think about where we are and where we're going, there's some important factors that I think are, important to keep in mind. These are things that I am keeping in mind as I think about food waste and what we're trying to do about it. So we know that our solid waste disposal capacity is severely limited. You heard me talk about that earlier this afternoon. Our food waste diversion progress has leveled off the past 3 years. We've made some really great progress, but over the past couple of years, that progress has leveled off, and we've made less progress over the last few years. We believe we can do better with a different approach to enforcing our current waste ban threshold. Right now, businesses and institutions that dispose of a half ton or more per week are subject to our ban. In practice, we believe that's limited our enforcement a little bit, and we need to be thinking about that. As I mentioned, we do have some available capacity, amounts to the neighborhood of 160,000 tons per year. We have both a need for more diversion and we think a good opportunity for more diversion of food material from the solid waste stream. We'd really like to spur continued capacity growth going forward. We recently contracted for and posted a report on our website about the economic benefits associated with our food waste disposal ban and activities around collecting food waste, around food donation and rescue, and around composting and anaerobic digestion and similar processing. And, going back to my first slide in this section, really thinking about how we can work more with our food donation and rescue partners to get more food material to those who need it. That's, really the best solution environmentally, it's the best solution socially, it's the best solution economically. So we really ought to be striving to do more with food donation and rescue as we move forward. Next slide, please. Okay, so circling back to talking about potentially expanding our waste ban, some of the things that we need to think about are how well can we do with voluntary programs. Obviously, if we can succeed with voluntary programs, we wouldn't need a mandatory approach. What's the cost effectiveness look like for collecting food scraps from smaller sources? It's a different collection infrastructure than for larger generators. We need to look at our ability of our infrastructure to manage more materials. We have some additional capacity now, but nowhere near enough to meet our 2030 goals. So we need more capacity. We probably need that capacity more distributed. We need to address the potential for increased contamination from small businesses and residents, do a good job of getting clean material at the same time as we enable the facilities taking that material to be able to accept it effectively. And then being able to inspect and enforce whatever waste disposal ban we have as effectively as possible. Next slide, please. Okay. So jumping right into this, because we still have a lot to talk about here, and I want to kind of cut to the chase. We are thinking about a potential two-stage expansion to the food waste disposal ban. This is just an informal proposal for discussion purposes at this point. We have a long way to go with any potential change to the waste disposal ban, and as always, we really want to engage with all of our potentially involved and impacted stakeholders in thinking about this and figuring out an effective approach to this. But what we've floated is a two-stage expansion, and these dates are no sooner than dates. So it would be these dates at the absolute soonest, quite likely later than this, but potentially fall of 2028, lowering our commercial organic span threshold to 0. Whether we do this formally or informally, probably likely informally, the intent here isn't really to look at businesses that may have incidental amounts of food waste. For example, an office with a lunchroom waste, a medical office, non-food retail, and things like that. That's, even though we're talking about a 0 threshold, that's not really what we're focused on. We're still focused really on food businesses when we think about applying this disposal ban, even though we have a 0 threshold. It's kind of like if there were a business that had, you know, an incidental small amount of bottles and cans in their waste stream, that likely would not be our enforcement focus for the bottle and can disposal ban. Kind of similar here. This would most likely include all or at least most of our schools, assuming, you know, they're feeding students at the school, and that's always a challenging sector to work with and implement programs. So we need to be really thinking hard about schools and how we can support schools. That's an important sector for us. And then after this, next slide, please. We're talking about a potential second stage expansion 2 years later, which would expand the ban to include residential food waste. And this would really be focused on municipal programs. Our thinking here, we had a program like this way back when, for any of you who've been around as long as I have, we used to have a department-approved recycling program and a department-approved composting program that kind of gave municipalities kind of a way to comply confidently with our waste disposal bans. We're thinking about, you know, that those programs no longer exist, but we're thinking about recreating that for food waste so that we could come up with a compliance standard for municipalities that would give them cost-effective ways to comply with the food waste disposal ban and divert food scraps from their residents, which could potentially include kind of throwing in the obvious food waste puns here and a menu of program options, whether it be curbside, drop-off, home compost bins, subscription service, or some combination of the above. And the idea being that potentially those eligibility requirements could increase over time. That would be another really important part of this program, something that would be developed clearly in advance of actually moving forward with implementation of this. We'd want to give you know, plenty of advance notice about what we're thinking about for the standards. So that's something we would be working on and talking about more. Next slide, please. So I think it's really important to understand about how this ban would work in practice, because I think 0 can be kind of an alarming word when you think about waste disposal ban. The gist of this is that this would, if this were to be implemented in this way, this would be implemented in very similar way that we implement our other waste disposal bans, for example, with cardboard and bottles and cans. So as we do now, we continue to conduct inspections at solid waste facilities. And just like those materials, there would not be a specific allowable disposal amount in the regulations, but for purposes of implementation by our solid waste facilities and by third-party inspectors, we consider action levels. They're typically volume-based action levels. So for example, for cardboard, it's 10% by volume, same for bottles and cans. And while we're not bound to those action levels, because like I said, there's no allowable disposal amount in the regulations, we do consider those action levels just from a standpoint of prioritization, because we want to really emphasize our resources, really our staffing resources, on the most important violations of the waste bans, the ones that are significant. And that's really how we approach our enforcement for waste bans now. And should we have a food waste ban with a 0 threshold, that's how we would enforce it for food waste as well. But what it would not require is that we would not have to document with a good degree of confidence that there's a specific amount of food waste in the trash from a specific business. And that's a really important distinction. Our food waste ban works very differently right now because of that threshold than other bans work for other materials. So that's kind of how we would kind of foresee this working in practice. I think that's a really important slide in this presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have a lot more work to do. We have a lot of things here to flesh out. We want to continue to engage stakeholders further. I've been doing that a little bit since our last meeting of our organic subcommittee meeting, or organic subcommittee, and I'll continue to do that. In particular, I've been reaching out to those in the business community and those kind of who are part of our food waste infrastructure to make sure their perspectives are taken into account here. We would then need to develop a refined proposal, and like we've been doing in other areas, to update our organics action plan to ensure that we have a comprehensive approach that can implement this effectively. We always want to ensure that we have a sound infrastructure in place to support any waste disposal ban. We would then, of course, need to develop draft regulations and guidance. All of our waste disposal bans are set in regulation. And so any change would need to go through a regulatory rulemaking process. And of course, that would include public comment and hearings, in addition to all the stakeholder engagement that we would have well in advance of a regulatory process. We would then need to promulgate final regulations with the final effective date, and then implement the ban and supporting programs. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have our next organic subcommittee meeting coming up soon. I think that date was December 2nd. I'll throw that link in the chat here for anyone who doesn't have it. If you're not on our email list for our organic subcommittee meeting and you'd like to be, please let me know. I'll make sure we add you to that list. And, you know, that's really, as we've done in the past, that's going to be our primary forum for stakeholder engagement. So if you're interested in these issues, if you have more thoughts, these discussions are going to be continuing over a significant period of time, and really encourage you to connect with that organics subcommittee group to engage more in this work, and both to hear what we're doing and for us to hear your opinions and perspectives. So I will wrap it up at that.
Thanks, John. And I see Janet has a raised hand. I do see a question in the chat here that rolled in just before Janet raised her hand, from Tom Mackey. He said, what percentage of currently banned food waste is being captured by the system? Any developer will want to know what the current bans are driving food waste to facilities before relying upon any more stringent ban.
Yeah, so I can't give an exact answer to that off the top of my head, but I can frame an answer to that. So we're currently diverting about 370,000 tons of food waste per year total. Roughly 20,000 tons of that is going through municipal programs that are primarily residential. There's probably some residential diversion outside of municipal programs, but probably not a huge amount. So we can kind of assume, you know, commercial institutional food waste about 350,000 tons in that ballpark. That's not necessarily all subject, not all businesses subject to the food waste disposal ban, but probably a lot of it is, probably most of it. And then we estimate we have about 500,000 tons of food waste from businesses that's still winding up in our trash. So I think that gives maybe some, you know, parameters to frame that number without giving an exact answer to the current ban, but give you maybe a ballpark sense of the numbers there.
Thanks, John. We do have a couple more, so stay with us. Janet has her hand raised.
First of all, so excited about this. You know, been pushing this for a really long time, and I think it's such great progress. And even though you tried to kill the buzz with that last slide of all the bureaucracy things we need to do before we get there, I just want to say hooray. The second thing is the more that we have worked on this, and this is just like for your consideration, and I do not bring it up because of semantics, but I think in anticipating rolling this out, it's a really important distinction. So as far as disposal goes and things that end up in landfills and incinerators, it doesn't matter whether it's a banana peel or a can of food, like we don't want food being disposed of, period. But in terms of getting the public on board and of course, the different policies that will be enacted, there is all the difference in the world between a banana peel and a unopened can of food that has been mistakenly labeled. And so someone looks at it and doesn't really know what Best Buy March 2025 means. And it's
Yeah.
edible and it ends up in the trash. And it's such a sin because someone, as you said, that it's just, we can't even get into the idea that we live in Massachusetts and 1 out of 6 people, and it's probably more than that, is food insecure. I mean, it's just mind blowing. But in terms of saying, I now use the terms food scraps and food waste. And as I said earlier, I do not think that's semantics. I think it's a really important distinction in getting people on board and mobilizing to do the different kinds of things we knew to make sure nothing organic ends up in an incinerator or a landfill. So I just wanted to make that little editorial comment. I know I never make editorial comments, so this is the first for me, but thank you.
Well, welcome to the world of editorial comments, Janet. So I think it's a good point. I think especially when we're talking about trying to get more food through food donation rescue outlets, that's a really important distinction. And even just, you know, prevention of food waste, just reducing the amount of food we waste to begin with. That distinction is particularly important when we talk about those kind of top of the hierarchy solutions. So I think it's a good point.
John P. also has his hand raised. John.
Hey, everybody. I got a couple quick questions or thoughts. Don't want to take too much time, but you mentioned the inspections at the solid waste facilities. What do you mean by that? You're talking about transfer stations, and then like how often, or what would that look like? You don't have to go into too much detail, but just wondering about that.
Sure. So I'm actually going to show some numbers about our overall waste ban inspections and enforcement in a few minutes towards the end of the meeting, just as kind of a general broad update on that. But there's basically 3 types of facilities. It's solid waste transfer stations. That's where we do the most inspections because there are the most of them. And then if for everyone who was on at the beginning, we have 5 active solid waste landfills in Massachusetts, 5 active municipal waste combustion facilities. We inspect those facilities as well. And I don't know if I said this, but our waste ban enforcement, MassDEP does not enforce waste bans directly against individuals or against residents. So all of our enforcement is either against a business, an institution, or a municipal entity. We make load observations at the solid waste facility, and then in turn, work to identify the source of loads where banned materials are coming from. We can potentially do enforcement to a waste hauler if they're particularly at fault, but most of the time we do enforcement against the waste generator where the load is identified as coming from.
Okay, and then kind of piggybacking off of that, the stage 2, the residential ban, what I know there's different options as far as like you said, pick up, drop off programs. So say a municipality had a drop off at their transfer station for food scraps. We work with some municipalities that have that, but not everybody's utilizing it. You know, I would say the majority of people still aren't. So what if they had that as an option, but still half the people weren't using it? There would be no enforcement deeper than that because you don't enforce it on the residential level. Just having the option would be enough type of thing, or?
So again, it's a little bit like, you know, bottles and cans, paper, cardboard. Now we have waste disposal bans where we don't issue enforcement actions against individual residents. So it's kind of similar to that. In terms of what that municipal program compliance standard would look like, I'm not sure yet. That's something where we haven't, you know, drafted a particular standard, but the idea would be we try to give options for a few different approaches. It may vary depending on, we kind of divide municipalities in our mind into those with drop-off trash programs and those with curbside trash programs, and the program options might be different for those types of communities. We'd have to think about that, but we don't have a specific answer to that question yet.
And I just have one other quick one. You mentioned that the half a ton per week ban has limited the enforcement. I wasn't sure what you meant by that, and when you explain it, how would the enforcement change if that's been limited by the half ton per week ban?
So the dynamic there is that for us to issue enforcement for a business against disposing of half ton or more per week, that forces us to be a little bit conservative in our estimation. So we're not actually weighing material when we're doing a waistband inspection. We're doing volume-based load observations of a pile of trash. We take a lot of data into account. We take the overall weight of that load. We take our estimated percentage of food material in the load. And then we also get the haul frequency for how often that business receives food waste collection services, so we know what time period that load represents. We put that together and we do a calculation, but there's just several factors that build in a little bit of conservative aspect to those calculations, because we want to be confident we're seeing a half ton or more from a business. And so that means when we're doing enforcement at the half ton per week threshold, it's typically to businesses that are disposing of clearly above a half ton per week. And there are a lot of cases where we feel that a load in our head is probably a half ton of material over a week's time frame, but difficult to know for sure. That's kind of the delta where we would potentially be enforcing more effectively with either a reduced or a zero threshold.
Thank you very much.
Great, John. Thank you. And thanks for the questions, John, as well. Claire had a question about seeing the wasted food if it were bagged. So yeah, that just kind of goes along with some of the challenges of that for sure.
Yeah, and just, the one point about that, we do not open bags during our inspections. It's a pretty important issue for us from a health and safety standpoint for our inspectors. So if there's material that's in bags, the bags are enclosed and, fully closed. Yeah, we don't see those materials.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on John's presentation? We got 3 more to go here, so we're pretty healthy right now on time, but feel free to get involved. Okay, let's go along to Janice Paré from our Municipal Waste Reduction branch. She'll be talking about the Reduce and Reuse Action Plan and that work group's activities specifically. So Janice, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Hey everyone. Everyone's still awake. My name's Janice, as Sean said. I'm going to take my time here to present a brief summary of our midpoint review of the Reduce and Reuse Action Plan that Mike Elliott touched on a little bit. This plan was finalized and published in December of 2021, so almost exactly 4 years ago. And it can be found on our Reduce and Reuse Working Group website, which is hyperlinked on this slide, and you should be able to open it when it gets shared, or you can always search MassDEP Reduce and Reuse Action Plan and find it in your browser. My plan for today is to give a very high-level summary of the actions we've completed and the stakeholder comments that we received. If you'd like to dive deeper into any of the information, all 3 of our feedback sessions are posted on the Reduce and Reuse Action Plan page in the archive section. Next slide, please. So our review and assessment took place last spring. And if you've looked at the action plan, you will know that it's multifaceted. So we had to break it into 3 different sessions. And each one focused on the different priority material streams, and we took comments at that time for each of them. Our goal for each of the meetings was to provide a status update on the progress we'd made, and then to solicit the feedback regarding whether we had missed anything or needed to update strategies given the evolution of the reuse and repair landscape since the plan was first published. And the next slide, I'm going to talk about the priority materials. So the way we approached implementing the plan is to focus on 1 to 2 material streams at a time. So if you click again, Sean, little blue arrows will come up. These indicate the material streams we've touched on so far in the last 4 years. Our plan is to begin working on household goods and business and institutional furniture, fixtures, and equipment early next year, 2026. We're not sure when we'll begin working on electronics, but our intent is to begin in late 2026 or possibly early 2027. It's a lot to do more than one at a time. Well, actually we did 3 at a time, but that was a lot. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of overview, like why these are considered our priority materials. One is they have a significant diversion potential on a tonnage basis. They can reduce waste by phasing out materials that are difficult to recycle. They have strong potential for increased reuse and donation, and they have existing local markets, but those markets are either underutilized or have development potential. So either they exist and they're not used, or they also, and they have development potential. So we want to increase those markets. So sorry, maybe I'm a little tired. Sorry. I don't have a lot of time to get into the specifics of each of these. So I'm just going to share some of the highlights of our progress and the actions we've taken so far. Again, if you'd like to delve deeper, you can go into the working group webpage. So can you go to the next slide, please? So here's just a reminder of what's within MassDEP's purview. And we did have to, reiterate this on every one of our meetings, just to sort of frame what we can do. So we provide grants and financial incentives, technical assistance, education and outreach, and network building. And we provide these common resources across all of those targeted materials within the action plan. Next slide. And this is just a quick summary of some of the types of assistance we've provided to foster growth in reuse and repair. I will get into specifics for each material stream in my next slides, but I wanted to share this because our grant programs, technical assistance, and methods for outreach are the same for each of the material streams in the action plan. And just so you know, these numbers are not this year's SMARP and RDP and microgrant numbers. They came up too recently for us to do everything. But so this is from the year before, FY25, and then for RDP, I think it was FY23. So numbers have changed and they've gone up a little bit. We have seen growing momentum in the reuse space, as evidenced by the variety of reuse stakeholders participating in our networks and the substantial increase in grant applications we've seen over the past 2 years. Happily, we're also seeing an increase in the number of municipalities providing reuse opportunities via swap sheds, zero waste days, repair events, and expanded centers for hard to recycle materials called CHARMs. We help fund those through grants and RDP points. The MassDEP funded Recycling Works in Massachusetts program provides technical assistance for commercial reuse efforts, and our 8 municipal assistance coordinators support municipalities on their quest to enable reuse at the local level. Next slide, please. Since I promised here are the specifics, starting with reusable foodware. In November of 2024, so that's last year, we published the best management practices for reusable takeout containers, known as the BMPs. It's just such a mouthful. It offers valuable tips and resources for Massachusetts-based food establishments interested in replacing single-use takeout containers and reusable serviceware. Specifically, the BMP provides insights on necessary inspection, tracking, returning, washing, rinsing, sanitizing, and storage steps for reusable containers. While we had several conversations with the Mass Department of Public Health to understand food code requirements around reusable containers at food establishments, and worked closely with their staff to vet the BMPs to ensure consistency with the Mass Food Code, I have to say that the document does not supersede guidance from local health departments. So always look locally, but this is just best management practices. To get the word out, Recycling Works conducts outreach to promote use of the BMPs. They also provide direct technical assistance for entities working to transition from single-use disposable items to reusable foodware. And the link on this slide will take you to new resources available through the Recycling Works website, including reuse service providers and a case study from a local college. We also provided grants that supported third-party warewashing. There was a recycling business development grant that was given to Redish, and SMRP and micro grants have been awarded to enable the transition to reusable foodware. And schools with reusable systems are earning points through the RDP Best Practices Grant. So we are trying to help support those. Next slide, please. On to textiles. Textiles, another priority material for which significant action has already been taken. Most notably, the MassDEP implemented a textile waste ban in November 2022. The ban prohibits the disposal of textiles and clothing in the trash. And this was done after years of work ensuring markets were in place to accept and manage recovered material for reuse and recycling. Additionally, for this effort, we facilitate an annual textile summit where we meet with recovery orgs to discuss issues and hear what they are experiencing. We collect textile recovery tonnage data to measure progress over time. Grants have been awarded through the Recycling Business Development Grant, Reduce and Reuse Micro Grants, and the Sustainable Materials Recovery Program, also known as SMRP. And they've built capacity for recovery and enable effective collection opportunities across the state. MassDEP also has a dedicated webpage for clothing and textile recovery that includes fact sheets, frequently asked questions about the waste ban, best practices for donation bin ordinances, and more, and also a link to some educational resources that municipalities can put on their websites regarding the waste ban and what to do with your mattress and or textile, because we did those at the same time. Just a couple of highlights here. In my notes, I have that 50,569 tons of textiles were collected in 2024, and 301 out of 351 munis have collection programs in place, and that's via drop-off, curb collection, and through events. So we've made progress. Next slide, please. Building materials. This one is fresh because we just had a workshop in October that was amazing. So I can't wait to get the report. But so we dispose of about 6 million tons of waste per year, and more than 1 million tons of this comes from the C&D sector, as you've heard already. Our solid waste master plan goal is to reduce C&D waste by 260,000 tons annually by 2030. Much is happening to enable recycling of building materials, as Mike Elliott already shared through the action plan. But we also recognize that reuse of buildings and their components is critical if we want to meet our waste reduction target. So over the past 3 years, we have committed resources to exploring and fostering reuse opportunities, or opportunities to foster reuse opportunities. So the deconstruction work group, which we see as a network of practitioners from industry, nonprofits, and the public sector, have come together for 7 webinars over the last 3 years to expand our mutual understanding of what deconstruction is all about, the environmental and economic impacts of our waste, and to learn about the many opportunities and examples across the US where deconstruction and building material reuse are already happening. We are currently in a transition stage, moving from learning to planning. So as I mentioned, we had the workshop last month. So we hired the Sustainable Performance Institute, led by Barbara Bochelome, to facilitate an in-person workshop with major stakeholders to take us to the next level. So in order to identify, the point of it was to identify opportunities to advance deconstruction in Massachusetts through regulations, policy, technical assistance, grants, infrastructure development, and outreach initiatives, coupled with a strategy for implementation. So that's kind of the report we're looking for. What can we do to make the next steps? It was a really great workshop, And I can't speak more highly of SPI. They did a great job. We're expecting the report with recommendations in early 2026. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. For each of our 3 webinars, as I mentioned, we provided time for discussion and feedback. Our prompts to participants were things like, are we missing anything? Has the landscape evolved? Does the plan still look good from your perspective? And this slide sums up much of the feedback we heard. It was not surprising, but it was like nice to hear, and have these discussions. For the most part, it seems that our stakeholders appreciate the comprehensive nature of the action plan and didn't have any additions or corrections. That said, there were these 3 themes that came up a lot in each discussion. The first was the issue of awareness and strategic outreach. In other words, how and where are we promoting the good stuff that we're doing? How are we ensuring that those who need to hear this message are hearing it? An example is MassDEP provides technical assistance and resources to municipalities and commercial entities regarding the BMPs for reusable takeout containers, but there are still many food establishments that don't know about this effort. So we are open to suggestions and opportunities to provide outreach and support related to the BMPs, as well as any of the other priority materials. We're continuing to look for opportunities beyond what we are already doing to raise awareness and find new audiences so that we can promote reuse more broadly. So we use Recycle Smart MA to get the word out. We use Recycling Works blog to get the word out. Recycling Works has work with universities to get the word out. So there's ways that we're trying to do it, but clearly we're not reaching everywhere. So open to suggestions on what we can do in addition. When it comes to bulky waste and building materials, there was one thing we heard over and over again. If you were on those meetings, you know what it was. It was storage, the need for storage. There's a desire by stakeholders to use the state's underutilized square footage as a temporary storage space for bulky items and construction components in order to extend the time between you collecting that stuff and then redistributing it to those who want it. So we heard, loud and clear, there's an endless supply of reusable materials, but the market can't keep up. So temporary storage space could help divert more materials from the waste stream. And we heard this feedback during our webinar and also during that deconstruction workshop in October. And what we know is that providing space is a multi-agency effort and something we are exploring very seriously. Lastly, regionalization. Regionalization and connection are critical to raising awareness and growing the market for reusables. The MassDEP supports regionalization through our grants and technical assistance programs, and we are open to hearing how we can help provide more support. Again, this isn't everything we heard, but it kind of summarizes the key takeaways. All the feedback we received has been noted and will be incorporated into future discussions. So next slide. So in conclusion, I just wanted to, did it work? Can you push the button one more time? Yeah, my blue arrows. I wanted to point out again that our plan is to begin working on household goods and business and institutional furniture, fixtures, and equipment early next year, 2026. And we are not sure when we will begin working on electronics, but our intention is to begin in late 2026 or possibly early 2027. This is our Reduce and Reuse team. I just wanted to put our faces up there. Oh, next slide, please. So if you'd like more information, you can reach out to us via email or, via email. That's fine. And that is all.
Thank you, Janice. Thanks for running us through all of that different stuff that you've been up to with the R&R group. And yeah, I know the conversation about storage came up at our most recent SWAC meeting as well. So there's some good examples provided of that. So, good to know we've got some ongoing work there. Let's see. Next, actually, wait a minute. I'm sorry, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Just checking the chat real quick. Okay, it does look like John addressed one of the questions. There is a link from Janet for a National Clothing Swap Day in here. It's a Facebook link for that if you're interested in checking that out. And also dumped in a link about the Reduce and Reuse Working Group if you want to look into their efforts more closely. So thanks again, Janice. Unless there's any other questions or comments at this point. Okay. Next, we're pleased to welcome Caitlin King, who is with the Household Hazardous Products Program. And as I said earlier, that's a group that's been very busy recently, some major updates to some of our HHP work here in the state. So Caitlin, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Sean. Hi everybody, I'm Caitlin King. So you may know me from Mercury programs. And now I'm helping out with the Household Hazardous Products Action Plan. So we'll jump right into it. Next slide, please. Okay, so even I just slipped up there and said household hazardous waste instead of household hazardous products. So we're all familiar with HHW, but what's HHP? So there's two different categories that we're focusing on with our plan. And one, you can see by this blue cylinder on the left side of the screen, that includes things such as lithium-ion batteries. We have propane tanks, car supplies like antifreeze or oils, and mercury products. So that could be your bulbs, that could be certain electronics. And they're managed through ongoing local collection programs, which can both be municipal and private entities. And then on the flip side, we have our green column, which is low volume, high hazardous products. So we have flammable liquids such as gasoline, household cleaners like bleach, and pesticides, garden supplies, things of that nature. And these are collected at public or private HHP events or permanent collection centers. Next slide. Okay, so if you haven't familiarized yourself already with the HHP action plan, there is a hyperlink on this slide, which hopefully they can access that when the PowerPoint is distributed, Sean.
Right, exactly.
Okay, awesome. So you can just click on that hyperlink there on that first bullet and see the final draft of the HHP action plan. So we had a few meetings with a bunch of different people from across the state of Massachusetts and beyond to create this action plan. And it's a 10-page document, and now we're starting to implement it. Next slide. Okay, so this is just a program that is directly in response to a goal that was listed in the HHP action plan, and that is the lithium-ion battery box distribution program. The name is pending, so that may change slightly, but some of you may have received a survey, and that's just the best way that we can reach out to a mass amount of people and get their opinions, thoughts, questions, concerns, and see what they're interested in receiving. So if you have received that survey, I strongly encourage you to complete it, because that will let us know who we should reach out to in the future and who may be interested in receiving lithium-ion battery collection materials so that you can safely collect batteries. Claire, sorry, I just saw the question pop up in the chat. So Claire asked if there's a link to the survey. And the survey was sent out to a limited amount of municipalities that were eligible. So if the municipality is a part of an MSP or municipal waste combustor then they will not receive the survey. So if you haven't received it, I would reach out to your MAC and see if you're eligible, your municipal assistance coordinator. And currently right now, I'm in the process of reviewing some data with some folks, Allison Buchler. I'm just going to shout out because she's really helping me with the data. And I'm reaching out to vendors, so through state contract, to see what's the best option that can provide us with items that the municipalities are really interested in having. And thank you to a few municipalities who've reached out to me directly for more information or suggestions of the products that have been really valuable and useful for their battery collection program. And that's helped me fine tune specifically what boxes or buckets are the best and why. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to give a shout out. There is a whole bunch of trainings through OSD. And so you may know already that FAC 110 is a state contract, and now it's being called WMR 001. And so there will be some updates to that state contract. However, I just wanted to point out, because I have had municipalities reach out to me directly asking if there's a list of vendors that I can provide to them that can help them obtain certain items. And so I encourage everybody to participate in some of the OSD trainings, which can be found on those hyperlinks. And you additionally, for hazardous and universal medical and electric waste disposal and emergency response, I encourage you to check out WMR 001, which is a state contract. And that's where you can find vendors for all sorts of disposal and emergency response needs. And so one of the trainings that's coming up in the OSD training is coming up on December 17th. And again, on January 6th is the Introduction to Statewide Contracts and Combis. So I just took that training last week to get a better understanding of what may be brought to you during that training. And I thought it was really valuable. It was interesting to learn how to search through and find potential contracts that are of interest, because there's a bunch of different ones. It's not just WMR 001. And then also how to search through and look for particular vendors or items that I'm trying to purchase. Next slide. Okay, so as I said earlier, we have some I sent out a survey. I have been receiving 27 responses so far. It was sent out to 250 people. And so far we've got one more week left to collecting the responses. So again, if you see a survey from my email address or regarding feedback for MassDEP, I highly encourage you to take it, because that is the best way for us to organize your thoughts and opinions and needs. It's a really great survey. It just lists everything. And so that's a lot easier for me to organize than individual emails or phone calls, or even just shout outs in a presentation or something like that. So additionally, I just want to say that we're updating our websites, and this is going to be a slow and steady process. So please keep an eye out. Usually there is a contact, and we're making sure that our websites do have contacts. So point of contact, maybe an email address or a phone number that you can reach out to. So if a hyperlink's not working, or if you have a question, you can reach out to them for more information. And so just kind of noticing that things may look a little different in the future. And that's just notice that we're updating our websites according to making it a little bit easier for communication and feedback purposes. Okay, next slide.
Looks like the next slide is John's presentation. Did you have another one, Caitlin? I might not have transferred over properly.
No, I didn't know if I had like a
Okay.
thanks, we're done slide, but that was it.
Yeah,
Caitlin,
thanks. We're done.
Claire asked, is this for all lithium ion batteries are damaged, defective, and recalled?
Yeah, so I'm looking into the options that we can purchase, but the concern there, we received a lot of concern about accepting damaged batteries. So I'm looking into different thermal suppressant medias that we can purchase and potentially distribute with the boxes so that smoke and fire can be suppressed in those buckets. So it's something I'm looking into. I can't make any promises at this time because I'm still receiving price quotes and looking into different options, but we're headed in the direction of hoping to have damaged batteries collected or providing the resources to so that a municipality could collect them. Okay, thanks, Claire. Any other questions?
Not seeing any. Give folks a second here. I know this has been a very engaging process with HHP. Got some whopper acronyms in there. I saw in a couple of those slides.
Yeah.
Always fun. Okay. Yeah, if there's no further questions or comments for Caitlin and Lynn, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
And we're going to move it back over to John Fisher. John, would you potentially be able to share screen for this home stretch here?
Yeah, I can do that. You want to stop yours and I'll line up?
So I'm stopping mine right now. John is going to update us on some of the other program elements that aren't covered by the work groups and presentations that we've already seen. And this will be our home stretch. So John, you get to, there's a running term for this, right? Is that the anchor leg of a relay race, right?
That's right.
There we go.
Can you see my first slide here?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a lot of content in the solid waste master plan. It's a broad plan. We've talked about much of that content over the presentations here this afternoon, but not all of it. So I wanted to try to touch on a few other aspects of the master plan and some of the key work we're doing within the umbrella of the plan in this portion of the presentation, just to kind of wrap it up and make sure we touch on as much of the key content as possible. Some of these things won't be entirely new. We've touched on some of these program areas a little bit along the way here, but I just wanted to kind of tie some of that together a little bit. So we're going to be talking a little bit about extended producer responsibility, in particular the Extended Producer Responsibility Commission that MassDEP has been sharing. And I'll give an update on that. I want to talk a little bit about waistband compliance. We've talked a lot about waistbands already, but I just want to give kind of a broad update about that. We'll talk about a upcoming set of regulation revisions, which has nothing to do with a new waistband, and then just highlight some of the core waste reduction program work that has come up at different points, but it's also really important to flag because this is where a lot of our both funding and staffing resources go towards. So it's a quick overview of what I'm going to cover. Okay, so EPR Commission, our Extended Producer Responsibility Commission, this was established in legislation last year, and DEP was directed to establish and chair this commission. We were given direction on the composition of the commission and work to fill all those slots. And then we're directed to develop recommendations specifically for 5 product or material categories: paint, mattresses, batteries, which is lithium-ion batteries in particular, electronics, and then plastics and other packaging. So those are the materials we were specifically tasked with addressing. We held our first meeting in April. That was kind of a kickoff meeting of the commission. We've held 6 full commission meetings to date. We have one more scheduled. We may need another one after that to wrap things up. We'll see how that goes. But right now we've held 6. We have one more scheduled. We also held 4 additional what we called advisory group meetings to gather more information on some of the more involved product categories, which included electronics and plastics and other packaging. So we held 2 meetings each on those 2 material categories. That was in addition to the 6 commission meetings. We have, as a commission, already voted on recommendations for paint, mattresses, and batteries. We've actually sent initial recommendations on paint and mattresses to the legislature already. Those are kind of interim recommendations. And then have one that's been voted on for batteries that we're working on pulling together to send to the legislature. And then at our next meeting, we're looking to finalize votes around electronics as well as plastics and other packaging. So that'll be at this next meeting, which is on December 9th. And you can find out more information on the EPR Commission via this link, or you can just go to our website and search for EPR Commission. It'll bring you there. There's been a lot going on. Our charge is to develop and submit a final report from the commission by January 15th, 2026 to the legislature. So we're nearing the end of that process right now. Okay. Waistbands has come up a little bit already, but one of the really significant steps that we have implemented in the 2030 Solid Waste Master Plan was to not just establish the waistband regulations, but to establish all the programs that implemented those regulations. And that included textiles, mattresses, and then I already talked a lot about food waste separately. So textile recovery, Janice alluded to these numbers. We've seen from 2022 to 2024, a 7,000 ton increase, about a 17% increase from specific organizations that are textile recovery organizations. This is definitely not all of the textile recovery that's going on in Massachusetts. There's a lot of that that's happening in many other ways, much of it informal. But this is from a small number of organizations where we obtained direct year-over-year data about their increases, and excited to see that 17% increase over a 2-year period, and believe we're going to continue to increase that further. For mattress recycling and reuse, we saw a really dramatic result in the wake of implementing the ban in 2022. The number of units recovered, this includes mattresses and box springs, went from 170,000 to 400,000 units. So we more than doubled the amount of mattresses and box springs that are either being recycled or reused. So it's really exciting progress. I will add just a side note on mattresses. We've always believed that a mattress waste disposal ban and mattress EPR can go hand in hand and work synergistically and go well together. So we've never seen that as a conflict as far as EPR, just drawing that connection. The waistband inspections data. This is year-by-year data going back to 2022. There's a couple notes about this. So in the wake of COVID, we were really rebounding our inspections. And then we also had a bit of a staffing shortfall. You can see kind of an up and down here pattern here. We had increased our staffing in early 2024. Then one of those inspectors moved on to other opportunities, nothing to do with MassDEP. It was a personal family shift. But that kind of, just as we were increasing our inspections, observing more loads, doing more inspections, that kind of temporarily reduced things. We did recently hire 2 new inspectors, so excited to get these inspection numbers up further. Our target, I believe, has been about 225 inspections per year, but we inspect much more loads of trash than that. You can see, we're seeing many more loads of trash in each inspection because we basically just stand on the tip floor or the landfill face and watch loads come in. This shows the amount of loads that, quote, failed and the rate of those loads in terms of the overall loads we observed. Not all of those loads are ripe or appropriate for inspection, and that's kind of a longer presentation, but there's only a subset of these we actually issue enforcement for. Some we issue letters that kind of act as warning letters for maybe smaller quantities of banned material, maybe food waste that's around the waistband threshold that I alluded to earlier. We may send letters instead of enforcement. And then others, we really just don't have a good basis for following up in any constructive way. So we don't always have a follow-up action to every load where we observe waistband materials. But this just gives you a little bit of an idea of our inspection pattern over the past few years. 2025, obviously, that's an incomplete number. We have November and December still to go and beginning to ramp up our inspection numbers. So looking forward to seeing these numbers rise in the years ahead. And then our enforcement data. So waistband enforcement, the way this works is for a first violation, we issue what's called a notice of noncompliance. Does not carry a penalty, but does require a response. If we see a repeat violation from the same entity, then we go with higher level enforcement, which does include a penalty. You can see it's pretty significant ratio between the number of notices of noncompliance and a number of higher level enforcement actions. This is in part driven by the staffing loss we had earlier in 2025. Part of the reason why there hasn't been a higher level enforcement so far this year, although there are several that are in process right now. The higher level enforcement is very resource intensive for us. It takes at least an order of magnitude more than a notice of noncompliance. So it's probably our least efficient method of getting compliance, but obviously an important part of what we do when we see repeat noncompliance. Could do a whole presentation on waistband enforcement, and maybe we need to do another one of those soon too, but this just gives you a little bit of idea of the activity that's been going on in that area. Some of you may recall that we've had kind of a stop and started, stopped, started again effort around developing proposed revisions to our solid waste regulations. We have two primary sets of regulations. We talk about 310 CMR 16, which is considered our site assignment regulations, and 310 CMR 19, which is our permitting regulations. We've been going through a really comprehensive review of both sets of those regulations and have a number of proposed changes that we're looking to propose. Many are updating, clarification type changes. The last time these regulations were comprehensively revised was 2012, and a lot of things have evolved since then. We have progressed with the internal review of those regulations. Those are now moving on to our commissioner's office, and we're hopeful to get those moved along for public comment soon, but really can't offer a definite date at this point, but we are making progress. It's been admittedly one of our slower regulatory processes. It seems like every time we have it done, we think of something else and we circle back. So it's been incredibly time consuming. Given where we're at with our review process, I can't say a whole lot more about specifics, and there are just a lot of little changes in the regulations. But once we're kind of ready to go with that, we'll schedule a briefing with the Solid Waste Advisory Committee prior to the formal public comment and hearing process. And then just to kind of tie things up here, I think at one point or another during the talk today, we've touched on all these programs, and I'm not going to go into each of them. But these are a lot of the core programs that we run, and we devote a really large proportion of our waste reduction funding to this set of programs. So they're important programs. We're constantly thinking about these programs every year. Every year we reassess the programs, how they're working, how are they being focused, are we focusing them in the best possible way to achieve the greatest impact. That's an ongoing assessment we do in our internal program planning year by year, always looking to tweak these programs, always looking to adjust them to get the most bang for our buck, literally. So this is always a work in progress. So with that, we're at time, and that brings me to my last slide. So we've gone through a lot today, a lot of different program areas that we're working on. We've shared a lot of information. In many cases, we've linked to more detailed information that's up on our website. After we finish here today, we'll be posting the actual presentation. We'll be posting the slides on our website. We'll also prepare the meeting recording and post the meeting recording as well. And then we're providing sort of a what I think of as an informal comment period on what we've shared here today and the action plans that we've linked to. We're suggesting if you have comments on what you've heard today, things either you like, you dislike, things you think we're missing, lost opportunities, things like that. We'd like to hear more about that as we kind of move to the final stage of this 2025 review. All of this work, if you haven't gathered, it's organic. We're continually working on all these plans, updating them as we go, but we are looking to kind of crystallize and complete this 2025 review within the next month. We do expect to take a bit longer than that to get it out for review, because this does have to go through a number of internal review steps before we complete it and publish it, but looking to try to finalize and publish this on our website by January of 2026. And for all of you who are familiar with our solid waste master plan process, a 2040 master plan is right around the corner. It won't be long before we start thinking about the next 10-year plan. For now, we will be following up, posting this information on our website. Sean will be sending a link out to our Solid Waste Advisory Committee email list when that information is posted. If you're not on that list and you want to be, please contact any of us and we'll get you added to that so you get our updates going forward. And that's all I have for now. I know we're at time here, but let me just pause and see if there were any other questions or comments that we can address before we wrap things up here. And I don't have the ability to see that right now, so anyone who does, please.
I'm looking at the chat, John, and not seeing any additional questions or comments. I know a good number of people hung on the call, but at this point, not seeing anything else. So folks, now or forever hold your peace until you send one of us an email, which is, encouraged. But, I'd like to thank folks for hanging in as we, got through all this information today. And, we'll certainly look forward to talking with you down the line. All right, that concludes today's Solid Waste Advisory Committee meeting. Thank you, John, and thanks to attendees and all the speakers today.